King, 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 King.
Great Tuesday and welcome to the King of Nations podcast. I'm your host, King, and today I'm joined by someone who I had the privilege of knowing, connected on LinkedIn, but I believe we had resonance and we began to dialogue with one another based off that. And that's what's really the space I'm in right now and the journey that I'm on, and she is as well. So we're kindred spirits in that respect. And I want to welcome to the King of Nations podcast, Aurelie Harp. Welcome to the King of Nations podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm very honored as well to be here and very joyful about our new relationship.
Same here. Same here. And now, one of the things that really kind of set the context for our show, and I believe is important, and I've learned through the years that is really important because I'm a strong proponent and believer that, as Einstein said, energy is everything and everything is energy. And when you really understand that beyond intellectually and begin to really apply it, you see the energy in our lives. And that's why this question I'm going to ask now comes from. I'm going to ask you, what's your spiritual energy number? Being from 0, life sucks, to being 10, life is awesome in this moment right now. What would you say that is?
So I'm gonna answer it's a shy 8.
Okay.
And the reason I say it's a shy 8 is I am intellectually very ready and committed, and I'm also noticing that I'm a bit anxious, like entering a stage, and that I feel like it's in the becoming. It's in the becoming. So we're going to, I guess, open our spiritual portal together, and then I won't be a shy 8, but a full 10.
I love that answer. That's an honest answer. I love that answer. That's probably one of the most honest answers I've ever gotten when I asked it. you know, and one of the reasons I asked that question is this, because like you, I've spoken at a lot of different events. I have a lot of different guests. I've been in a lot of meetings. And when I asked that question, what I've noticed is that if people come in and they answer a 4 or a 3, that, and it's not so much their fault. It's just that people bring energy to that meeting, right? Everything that happened to them prior to that meeting, whether it was traffic, whether it was arguing with a spouse, whether it was taking a kid to the drop off at daycare, whatever that is, you bring in energy. Now you got to settle down and get framed for this meeting, right? So sometimes it's best not to have the meeting, to reschedule the meeting with the person that's at a 4, because they're not going to be present. They're going to be engaged, and they may be adversarial, right? So it's not personal, as they teach you, as we say, Don Miguel Ruiz teaches us with the 4 agreements. Don't take anything personal. So it's not personal. It's just that in that moment, that energy is at a 4, right? And that's what you're getting. And so that's why I asked the question, because if your energy is at a 4 because of whatever, and you're keeping your commitment, which I respect, but we can always reschedule to where your energy is at your highest, because if you're at its highest, we can be as creative as possible. And whatever the universe has that can come from this conversation will come, because we're both in a feeling of abundance and gratitude, right? So that's why I asked the question.
I also wanted to respond to this question. I also feel that it's a thought-provoking question, because when you hear the word spiritual or energy, I'm wondering, like, and you did explain for you what it means and so on. And I'm wondering also, I know for me that the hearing it, you're like, whoa, what are we talking about? Are we talking about religion? Are we talking about quantum physics? Are we talking about relationships, being human? What does that mean? This spiritual energy. So I think there is also that element of being curious or being shocked by it, or whatever that is. There is a response to that question.
Absolutely, it is, and it was not intended to be a shock like that. But now that you said it, I see it. it's because it answers a lot of things in a lot of ways, right? And so, but thank you. Like I said, I would definitely be grateful for the dialogue we're having on it because it's the most I've had about it. But it's definitely a very important question to me, and because for me, my goal is always to be at a 10. I'm not saying some judgment to anybody. That's my personal intent. And the engineer in me, the logical person, says I don't see a reason not to be a 10. Now, things happen in my day that's going to challenge that. And then it's for me to say I refuse to have a bad day. I'm going to do something throughout that day to get it back up to a 10, right? Because it's an energy level, it fluctuates, right? And so that's why I say in this moment, so thank you for having this dialogue because it gives me a better chance to explain it. And as I'm going older and more in that space, I'm learning how better to articulate. Like I used to didn't articulate the way I'm explaining to you right now. I didn't do that in the past, but now I'm doing it. And that's coming from, I remember, and that's what I want that conversation to be like. I remember when Gandhi had just finished making a speech to the, at that time, the English Parliament. And when he had finished speaking for like 2 hours, one of the British leaders asked Gandhi's assistant, he said, how can he speak for 2 hours without memorizing anything? He didn't look at his notes, he just spoke. He said, because he doesn't have to memorize it because he lives it. When you live something, it's authentic, you know it. You don't have to prepare a speech. You don't have to prepare a speech to memorize things that's not you and you're out of character, right? Like you don't have to memorize a speech when you talk to your children. That's love, right? So that's the goal, to get to that space where when you live it, the conversation flows and you've been authentic. And that's why I believe you are. And that's why I want to have you on a show as well. That's what's important. The show for me is to connect with not people who we have things in common with, it's people who we have things in alignment with. And people who are on journeys like myself of unity and giving and love. I want to talk to those people. I want to see is there anything we have that now that we have that alignment, what do we have in common? Now we can flip that and say where synergies exist between us. And so with that being said, let me ask you this question. Tell me something good.
There are so many things that are good, and I'm going to say I really appreciate these questions because I think that's the hard questions, especially when we wake up every morning with news that the world is going crazy, collapsing, we're in war, and how you realize that the question of looking for what's good is like maybe a revolution to be doing. So something that's good is, well, last night I had a group, and I started the group with some strangers, like some people in this group. We were like 6 of us. Like 2 of them I knew-ish, and 3 are very new people. And I think what I love the most about this conversation is, like, in every conversation, all of a sudden something emerged, and we talked about walking on eggshells and how does that feel like? Does that mean we put boundaries with one another, or is it the physical experience of not knowing and taking a risk of saying, being, having a conversation, and all of a sudden being, it's not the usual conversation when we're safe. And the great thing about it is the transformation that happened, and up to this morning when I just had a message from someone just saying, and it stays with me, I still have the reverberation of this conversation, and I do too. And I think this conversation yesterday helps me to have the conversation with you today. I'm still with the reverberation of the walking on eggshells, not as a bad thing, but as, what if that's the way to be in our world right now?
That's the beauty of humanity, right? Is that we get to experience all our states, right? And that's the beauty. It's just a matter of which one you allow to be your dominant state. right? But thank you for sharing. I think that's wonderful. I think that's an excellent insight. And this definitely helps me look forward to today's conversation. So let me really properly now introduce you to our listening audience. I am joined by a woman who spent over 2 decades at the intersection of performing arts and architecture of soul. Aurelie Harp is the founder of Wemanity. Is that pronounced correctly?
It's so I realize it's not an easy one. It's Wemanity. So it's not
Wemanity.
humanity, but Wemanity.
I like that. Wemanity. I like that. That's powerful. I didn't see that. Thank you. Wemanity coaching. But as I looked at her work, I see more than a coach. I see a frequency tuner. Aurélie, your bio speaks of moving teams beyond fragmentation into the art of being human together. In the world I inhabit, we call that the transition from dissonance to resonance. You're across oceans from France to New York, not just in geography, but in the inward journey of discovering that true transformation doesn't happen in the hustle. It happens in the curiosity of the unknown. So today I want to give you your flowers for your commitment to the collective art form of growth. You're a practitioner of creative independence, and you recognize that we are not just individuals, we are nodes in a larger grid. You bring a prophetic fire to the way you challenge hyper-individualism, and I'm honored to dive into the substance of how you engineer space for human emergence. So welcome to the King Connection podcast.
Thank you so much, King. I have to say, I never had an introduction like this. It's and to hear your take on who I am is wow. I want to know this person. you made me fall in love with the whole thing. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, my goal is to connect with intent. That's what I have. And this is the intent to, the book that I really look at, that really I modeled my life after, or my Bible, I would call it, is the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the 5th habit is seek first to understand and be understood. And you really think about that, we're not taught to listen and understand. We're taught to be quiet. And while we're quiet, someone's talking, we're processing in our heads all the things that's going on in our lives, and that voice is communicating, and we've been respectful, but most of us not really listening to what the person says, especially the more we know them, like family. That's where it really shows. Like, I know this person, so I don't need to really pay attention to what they're saying. But when you do lean into somebody and listen with intent, it gives you a different perspective of who they are. And you're not so quick to judge. And it's so easy to judge when you have a superficial understanding of who a person is. By their physical description, they look, and you make a judgment in that space. Or you read something they wrote or something they said, you make a judgment in that space. But you really get an opportunity to really see them as different. And let me explain this, and I want to get into my next question. I want to set the context for you to understand why I think the way I think and process the way I process. So I'm an architect of what I consider human emergence. And I'm really in the space of understanding now at this stage of my life, what is human emergence? How do you ascend to a higher consciousness, right? I spent my last 30 years studying and looking at truth, from reading all the things about spirituality and religion and art of manifestation. I studied from Tony Robbins to Wayne Dyer to Deepak Chopra to Mike Gerber. I have an engineering, not degree, but background building systems. And I've gone through the entire Black consciousness movement. So I'm clear on who I am in that space. I don't come from a victim mentality. So I'm grounded in all these different thoughts and these disciplines. And as an engineer, I put that to a place where I can create frameworks to help me understand how to create human emergence. And so I realized that everything is energy at the end of the day, going back to what I said about Einstein. And there's 3 things I look at once you understand that context. Number 1, once everything is energy and energy is everything. Number 2 is that energy only has 2 states. It's either increasing or decreasing. And number 3, it can be measured. Now you understand it can be measured, then the question becomes, how do I measure it? And you measure it by, Dr. Hawkins has a map of consciousness, which he's created a numeric value assigning to thoughts. And I say, okay, that's a very powerful way to that a lot of people accept in the spiritual conscious space as a way of measuring energy and measuring thoughts. So my goal is to get to 500 hertz, which is love, right? Where most people, he says, vibrate to 200, which is courage. So there's 300 hertz in between that. And 400 hertz is willing seeking. People are willingness, they're seeking, they're open. And then you're lucky you meet people there. So my questions now, once we understand everything is energy, I want to look at your career through that perspective, through that lens, and ask you questions about the drainage and the increases over your life in various aspects of your career. And I've broken it down to different 8 for a framework of 8 different energy forms. So the first one, now in your physical energy, in your 20 years working at the intersection of art and leadership, have you noticed that most people only begin seeking real connection and meaning after their body has given up first? The exhaustion, the illness, the complete shutdown?
Yes, and it's interesting because I'm hesitating of using the word I think, I believe, I feel, or maybe that's also a sign that we live in a culture that is prominently prioritizing the brain and the cognitive. So it's as if we were pushing the brain and not caring at all about what's going on in the body, as if the two were separated and having no impact on one another. And I think that what we realize over and over in our lives is how both are extremely interconnected, and that the body shows. The body is kind of our mirror and mark in life, the same way when you see wrinkles and so on. It tells you something about the human experience that you've been having on this earth. And there is something very tricky and interesting on devaluating the body. We tend to not listen to the signs that are sent. And we're pushing the machine, the brain, and overproductivity alone in all of this, and we are exhausting our body. And so it's as if we were waiting for the body to stop, to stop functioning, for us to notice that this is interconnected and that we are exhausting our own resource.
Wow, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Now, when it comes to emotional energy, we come and see those personal, professional thunderstorms, I like to call them. The collapses, the burnouts, not as failures, but as biological necessities. Like, a lot of people don't realize that in nature, when it does thunderstorm, it creates nitrogen in the air and oxygen, and all that helps to go ahead and flush out those and nurture the soil and get the seeds that's under there vibrating again, and it stems new life. And I look at the storms in my life, or the challenges, I call it the wreckage in your life, as those thunderstorms. And if you planted the right seeds, then that wreckage will now stimulate those seeds to grow. That wasn't there, that's been dormant until something happens, right? Where you have that choice of, I got to change, and you hit that urgency, not I need to change, and then you put on your to-do list, well, I'll change in June. No, now you change them now because the urgency of the situation brings that. And so that forces the body a reboot. Have you found that people who are actually more willing to stay open, to stay curious, and once they have nothing left to protect, once they've been wrecked into that context and gone through that storm?
I think that what I observe in my group is that people who went, and I'm sorry to use the word shit here, but people who went through a lot of shit are less swayed by changes, transformations, or things going on in the world. That doesn't mean they're not impacted, but they are open to make it more ordinary, that shit is part of life, and that instead of seeing it as anomaly, it's kind of like what you were saying. There is a biological things of shit becoming a seed for a new transformation and of something new to be created. So I definitely, like, that's one of the core principle, I would say, maybe in my work in groups, and what I play with people in my groups, is that there's nothing wrong with us. And when something happened and we go through something hard, sometimes we think that we are ashamed. We're putting boundaries, we're putting protection, because we are afraid that for others to see that we are going through a hard times means we are going to be weakened and dead, instead of maybe seeing another way, which is everything is a gift. So I'm here going to talk about influences of Buddhism, which I think is a very interesting way of seeing the world here, and maybe more quantum physics in that way, that everything transforms. So going back to your energy, it's like nothing disappeared, nothing, like, everything transformed. But I also, every time I'm thinking of Martin Luther King and his, in his speech in 1967 on the creative maladjusted, and how instead of seeing our maladjustment as a problem or a deficiency, what if it's a sign of our willingness to say the world is sick, some things need to change, we need to change the frequency, we need to change the world, because that, I like, the way I feel and the way I am is impacted by all the shit that is created in the world. So what can we do with that? And how can we be creatively all maladjusted and not accept things for the way they are, but be in the process of constantly changing with it?
See, that's where you and I are in alignment at, because I'm also in that same path, and I'm in that same, I would say, frequency. I like to call it frequency of seeking how to make the world a better place. But then, what's funny, I've been putting that growth toward myself over the years, as I said before. And then you reach a point in your life where you read all the books, you can say all the quotes, whether even folks who are into their religious dogma, they can quote the Bible or the Quran, or they can quote teachings from Alan Watts or other Buddhist experts. But are you living it? Right? That's where, after about 40 to 45, when you reach that age, that's when you start to know the truth within yourself. Because in your 20s, you always live with that intent, the belief. The 30s, if you got into that studying at that age, you believe you will get there, or you believe you're there now because you're doing certain actions. But once you get to be 45 and 50, you start questioning. Once you've already achieved all the things they told you should get, you're married, you have kids, you've had the career, you've gotten the financial success, and then you still feel there's something more out there, that my soul is deeper than what I've attracted, and there's got to be something deeper for me out there, right? And you mentioned a group. Talk more about your group, because I want to have you delve into that and why you created a group as well.
So I was always attracted to groups because I've always loved theater, and thinking, what is this experience when we go to the theater, when we are all, the audience is sitting next to one another, there are people playing on stage and with big questions and so on, and there is a sort of collective emergence of being human together and responding to life together. And how come, like, how can we see more theater in our lives? How like Shakespeare, I think, was saying that we are merely all improvisers of our life, and we're all like actors and of our lives, and that it's something we forget, that we are playing a role the minute we are born together, like on earth and so on. We are both who we are, and we are also taught how to be. We are also impacted by others. We are agreeing to participate in a certain culture, or to become a parent or a teacher or a doctor or an entrepreneur. Like all these kinds of roles we are taking. And at the same time, we are living in a culture where we are, and I'm talking here more the Western cultures, but I do think that it's also becoming true everywhere. The capitalistic hyper individualism is everywhere, and that with like the focus on hyper individualism, we are separated from one another, and we are asked more and more to live our life as if we had to figure out things on our own, and using our brain all the time to be like to solve problems, and that's exhausting. It's draining, and deeply inhuman. We are social. The way we learn language is social. We don't learn language by miracle, and the baby doesn't sit down like the baby would die if it was not surrounded by other adults and learning, having a stage for development. So that's all this idea of stage for development. How can we create stages for collective development when we are learning both how to be in the world, and in the process discovering something about ourselves, discovering our commonality, like you and I, King, we are both, as we are talking together, like discovering maybe things we're aligned on. Maybe we are discovering our humanity, like our love for humanity. And also all our questions of how come we're such a weird species. And at the same time, we are discovering our unicity of, I realize I'm somebody who likes to now be a clown. 10 years ago, you would have told me that, and I would have been like, are you kidding me? But I realize more and more that I'm interested in doing things that are going beyond words, for instance. That's what I'm discovering as I'm doing groups and so on. So going back to your questions of groups and why groups is, I love relationships, and I love being with other people, listening to people's stories, telling them my own stories, and building new stories together. And I do think that's what makes us move forward, or move sideways, or make decisions, is by sharing things we know and wondering about things we don't know, and using our imagination. That's how we're keeping our creativity alive, and that's how we keep building the tools that we need to move forward, or to move together. And I realized, like, I met, like, first of all, like people like in a community in New York City, and it was the East Side Institute, and Lois Holtzman and Fred Newman created that, which was social therapeutics. And this idea that, what about creating groups where people who have on paper nothing in common could come together and create their lives? And I was extremely intrigued by that and started practicing it. And all of a sudden I realized that what I want to do more and more is to create public spaces everywhere, and to give people the opportunity regularly to meet with others, and to not stay in our little bubble, to not keep like being restricted, but to continue to expand, be challenged, be curious about the other. What does that even mean to be self and the other? Where are we human together? How are we fully human, to go in one of your big question of how do we practice our humanity? And certainly we cannot practice our humanity if we stay in our bedroom watching TV and just on our own. We need to practice it with other. And it's also, I'm more and more thinking of, where are the public space in our cities? School is really probably the last place where people and children are mixed together, and on purpose, on design, public schools were really this idea of bringing kids that have nothing to do but the one thing that bring them together is the activity of learning together, of playing together, of of being kids together. And then after that, you used to have work, but since COVID and remote work, like what does that even mean to have a space at work? I'm not even sure there are so much diversity in work in the workspace. You have people going in tech, and you have doctors, and you have but all of a sudden we're all asked to be hyper specialized. And then where are the public spaces? Maybe I don't know, like senior centers are another public spaces later in life when you go and meet people and so on. But there is all this gap between where are the rich people meeting poor people? What is middle class? What is it to be black in New York City, and white in New York City, and Jewish in New York City, and like what are all these questions, and how can we have a space when we don't walk on eggshells, and when we ask together, hey, I feel lonely, do you feel lonely too? How come? What can we do to feel less lonely? I'm stuck, I would love to become somebody else, I don't know how to do that. Oh yeah, me too. And just to take any opportunity as an offer to create something new together. And in my experience, creating something new together creates joy. It creates, so as Fred Newman was saying, creating something new is the cure. Martin Luther King was saying the same, like being together and being creatively maladjusted together is the cure. All of a sudden, you feel seen and at the same time, not so special. And there is something about feeling both seen in your unicity and also an ordinary human being, not so special, because we are together. We are side by side, like little crabs moving together. That is extremely beautiful and hopeful, because then you feel like things are possible.
Thank you for sharing that. That's definitely something that I'm aligned with. Now, one of the things that I do to help myself understand and learn when I'm listening now, when you lean in, you look for words that you feel, right? Words that stick out. Because you can't memorize everything everybody's saying, right? But you find words that stick out that you feel, that you can relate to, and say, this is what I pulled from it. This is what I pulled from it. This is what I pulled from it. It helps you see the person, not just hear the person, right? Not just try to record. Like computers can record your voice, right? But I want to be able to see in your voice, right? And so what I mean by that, I give examples. So what I heard in there was love, stories. I've heard human emergence. I heard coming together. I heard you talked about Martin Luther King. That resonates with me, right? As a matter of fact, you referenced him, and there's this quote that I always quote by him that says, we are a chain. We're linked together indivisibly. I can't be who I ought to be unless you can be who you ought to be. We are a chain, right? So you talk about that and what you said. You pretty much spoke to that exact quote and even referenced him as well. So those are things that I look at when I say connect with intent, that I see alignment, right? Now, throughout the years of my life of building, because I'm also building networks and connect with people and things, what I've been careful of, though, and I've been burned, I just want to ask your opinion, how you deal with it, is that that's why I came up with the aligned conversation and the aligned thinking. Because when you build with people who have things in common, and it's like, okay, that's a great reason for us to be together, either maybe because we're all the same race, or we're all the same religion, or we're the same ethnic group, or we're the same political party, and we come together for that reason. And now that's beginning to look at how we can build. And you mentioned build as a word you use as well. How can we build? But then you realize that people are vibrating, again, going back to the Hawkins scale. Some people are vibrating at courage level. Some people are vibrating at greed, and even though they may be politically aligned with you, or in common with you, but their vibration is low. And so I see that as a fragmentation. You write about that as a fragmentation as well. So now with the teams and communities you work with, and when you see that people are falling apart inside, in your experience when a group fragments, what's the first thing that stops flowing between people? Is it
Mm.
trust? Is it honesty? Or is it simply the willingness to be seen?
All of the above, but mostly what I see or observe is what goes away first is risk taking or taking risks. And in a way, the fear to be together and the fear to be with other who would not think like us, who would not look like us, who would not agree with us. And so I think, in a way, that's going back to what we were talking before about the building was shit. There is something that I am turned on or excited by having people who are not necessarily agreeing up front. The question I ask us is, and can we build something together, even if we really fully disagree? How does that look like for a group when somebody is extremely resistant, extremely afraid? Another is very open, very curious, very blunt, and all of a sudden to see the beauty that the transformation that is happening is not only that maybe the one that is very afraid, very resistant, and so on is going to give to the group a lot about their fears, a lot about their vulnerability, a lot about possibly aggressivity, whatever that is. And maybe for the one where hyper curious, hyper confident, to be thought provoked and changed and impacted by what the other one gave, by what the group created. So I guess what I'm saying is what I love in groups is the messiness, and that there is something about this messiness of agreeing every day or every week to start over building something new. And I think there is something about, I'm going here to be hyper spiritual, but in Buddhism, you say that Buddhahood is something that we might aspire to become. And at the same time, there is Buddhahood in every state of life, from hell to animality to, all this world that are created. You have hell in Buddhahood as well. You have, so the question of bad and good and perfect and imperfect is all messy and together, but the activity of the willingness to create something new together is what touches me the most. Is how come even in a time of I think in a time of crisis, or at a funeral, or when something like a situation is like really bad, hearing the laughter of someone, or hearing people like coming together and doing an activity that could be, I don't know, taking care of the cooking for the funeral, or in a group, like all of a sudden somebody saying something that is ridiculous and everybody laughing. The release that happened at that moment of the doing something together make all the differences vanish. And even if it's for 1 second or 2 seconds, that was for me a moment of magic.
Okay. Now, I'm curious, you talk about practicing being human together. And that phrase carries a lot of tenderness. Does that practice require for people to first get quiet before they can engage with others, to decompress, to be alone with themselves, before they can truly show up for one another? Or can genuine connection happen in that group with the messiness?
All in the above. I think the one thing that I love groups so much is how can we make groups when there is no rules? accept the rule of being willing to create something new together. So sometimes, like, I'm going to tell you my way of being in groups is I'm listening to what I need and what do I need to be in the group. And I'm asking also the question to the group, hey, what do we need? What do we need to create something together? And somebody might say, I'm exhausted right now. I had noise all day long and I cannot stand hearing like one more noise. And maybe so what will be needed for the group is to connect with silence and see, in order for this person or for the group to be able to listen to one another. But another day it could be excitement and somebody like, or the group being, you don't know why, but that day everybody is messy, excited, or furious and having conflict. And then we are going to start with that. And it's messy and see what's, I'm going to give an analogy. It's like jazz, or it's like an orchestra, where you can have as much cacophony and quack or you can have a beautiful harmony, or you can have all in between. But the deal is we're improvising music together.
Now, my question, because you moved from France to New York, what has your experience been with building that kind of group dynamic in France compared to building that group dynamic in New York? Is there a difference? Has there been a difference?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say maybe first there is a difference because I've been living in New York now for 13 years. So am I French? Am I New Yorker? Who am I? So I think there are things where I have become New York as well. And that being in a group is not easy. And the idea of joining a group is not obvious. People might be curious, but I would say one of the common question is, what's that? What? Hold on. I need clarity. What's the rules? What's the goal? And to tell people, well, the only goal we have is to build a group, is a very, I'm going to use the word radical here, but it's a very radical offer. So on one side in New York, I feel like people, because I think New York has this essence of everything is possible. So it's weird, but everything is weird in New York. So you find people and you don't feel, you feel awkward, but not so awkward, to make that offer on the table. In France, first the vocabulary was not the same. So all of a sudden also it's like, what's the language? And at the same time, the joy to see that the people who are joining are excited by this idea of we don't know exactly what we're going to do. It's going to be very creative. But it's I don't know how to respond to your question, to be honest. I do think that there are a lot of cultural differences. And so the language and the approach is very different. But at the same time, I also feel that I'm constantly changing the offer. I've been building groups and so on in a way for 20 years. And it's the same offer is on the table. But every time, depending on who I'm talking to, the conversation is going to be different, and the context. So, for instance, right now, I noticed that in Europe, a lot of people who are joining my group are identifying as neurodivergent. And I was like, okay, wow, that's interesting. I never advertised of saying this is a group for. So what does that mean? Is neurodivergent being maladjusted, creatively maladjusted? Like my hope is that that maybe neurodivergence means creatively maladjusted. In New York, I realized that there are lots of women. It's harder to find men. And I always wonder if in our culture, playing and being ridiculous or whatever, because sometimes we are ridiculous when we play, is, or being vulnerable. I don't know. Is it something that is more scary for men in New York City? And at the same time, I say that. And then yesterday I had a group when all of a sudden a majority of men showed up, and we were 2 women in the group and surrounded by five men. So I don't know. I think maybe the group is a good indicator of the world is constantly changing, and um, lots of various people, like you never know who is going to be really interested in joining the group.
No, I've always heard, and I don't know. That's why I'm asking this. That you know, France is a very emotional country. The French are very emotional people, and America's not as much in the affectionate emotion. We're kind of the reactive emotion more so. And I noticed this when I went to Jamaica. When I was in Jamaica, when I was back in my 20s, but I was at this Burger King, and in America, if there's a group of people sitting over here and there's empty seating here, you want to sit as far away from that group as possible. That's just how you think. Where there, they would sit among, like, all the people were kind of sitting around each other because the people were there. Other people came and sat there, not because they were part of the group, but just to be around that because they felt more comfortable being around each other. With Americans, we go to movie theaters, we want to sit as far apart from each other as possible.
Yeah.
What is that like in France? Do you all have that kind of? How's it there?
So it's interesting because it's a mix. I think France is also hyper individual. And on that side, like a bit similar to the US, where you go in the theater and so on, and people are like, "Oh my God, I want to be alone with my movie and just see my stuff." And we also love social moments. So, for instance, our social life is very much inviting one another at home and having dinners, meeting in a bar, and having like more messiness, I would say. I also found something that when I arrived in New York City, I felt that relationships were coded and not very fluid. There was a lot of separation, racial separation, gender separation. I think it's changing, and maybe New York City is an exception, but I was struck by that. I felt it was less messy than in France, and very coded. And I don't know why I'm telling you the word coded, but as if there were unspoken rules of how to be. And I always felt that it's as if there was a manual of how to be a man or a woman, or I'm always surprised by the fear that people have to say the wrong thing, or to be seen as unpolitically correct, or so they're whereas in France, like being unpolitically correct is part of maybe the DNA. So and maybe something else is I would say French people love talking about politics, being in conflict, being philosophical, and arguing all the time. We never agree. Like, if you agree, something's not okay. It's weird. And here I feel that there is more politeness in certain community as well. Like I think I'm not. I think there are also like a differences between cultural differences in New York City and so on. But yeah.
You talk about, you mentioned in your work, and you've mentioned several times throughout our conversation today, creative independence. The state you're pointing toward, actually something that can be measured. My question is, can that be measured, not in KPIs or productivity, but in the room itself, where you're working and building with the people? Can you feel it? Can you describe what it's like when the group gets crossed from performing together to actually creating together?
So I would say yes, and I'm working very hard to not measure.
Hmm.
And when I say that is, I'm also wondering, because my other, just so you know, my intention this year is, how can I stay with the unknown and not to come up? I have a lot of strong opinions, but how to stay open to how come I have a response to the word measurement. I think I have a response to the word measurement on one side because of, again, we live in a culture when it's always measured and productivity and KPI, as you said. So that's, and then I can feel like, certainly I can feel moments when the group is very close together. And I can feel moments where the group is distant, fragmented, or, but almost like, or cold, not warm. When kind of, when you're at the beginning of a play in a theater and maybe the first 15 minutes, you're still somewhere else. You're not sure what you're watching. You're not really involved. You're not really engaged. And then you don't know why, but there is a moment when everybody is like this. And that's kind of what's going on as well in groups. And everybody's like this for a moment. And then we go back to sometimes explaining what, like some people are going to try to explain what just happened, or we're going to be so happy with what just happened, or we had a moment of big tension and everybody was like, oh, are we going to survive this moment? And then we do, and it's a really, so I think the measurement is more like a breathing exercise of there are moments of connection and being close, and then there are moments of expansion and going further away, and without knowing if we're going to come back together again. So yeah.
Okay. All right. We're getting to the top of the hour, and I want to ask you just two more questions. This question is, in your work, people often arrive wearing their diagnosis like armor, right? You talked about it before. I'm burnt out. I'm exhausted. I have attention deficit disorder. Now, do you find that giving someone a creative framework, a stage, or an improvised moment actually helps them to get that step out of that story and find their truer self?
Yes. And I'm going to try to respond succinctly. One is, whenever somebody comes in a group, I think I work very hard with the group to radically accept who the person is and how they are and how they experience life. And at the same time, be curious and asking them and challenging the assumptions that we all have around everything, including, I don't know, I have ADHD, or I'm burnout, or what does that mean? How does that feel to discover that you have ADHD or that you have a burnout? Is that the only thing is that all? Are you defined by the entirety of that? And then I'm going to say the second response is, the clown, humanitarian clown and activist Patch Adams. I'm following his son Lars on Instagram, and recently Lars put a podcast on Patch Adams' work, and Patch Adams is always saying, like, when he was young, he was diagnosed of depression and almost being suicidal and so on. And then I'm going back to Martin Luther King. He went to this I Have a Dream speech. He was present there and just realized again that what if it was all about love and feeling connected, and that there is not such a disease of being depressed, but it's loneliness, of feeling disconnected, and not only feeling disconnected, but being alienated. And what else can we do? And Patch Adams' response was, I want to live my life giving gratefulness and love and fart. And I love the fact that he added fart. Yes. Humor.
Absolutely. But yeah, that's a wonderful statement that you shared there, because I was thinking about imagining Patch Adams. That was Robin Williams, wasn't it? So yeah, I imagine that, remember that character in that movie, and as you're talking about him, I was actually seeing him in his lab coat, the white lab coat with the stethoscope around him. Yeah,
And the red nose.
and the red nose. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my last question I want to ask you, and perhaps the most important, I'll look at: are you building a? My question is this, and I'm going to say it how I frame it, then give you an opportunity to answer it. Are you building a coaching practice, something that helps people feel better when they are with you, or are you designing something more permanent? And what I mean by that, an architecture where curiosity, courage, and creative collaboration become the permanent frequency of the people you touch long after they have left the room.
So I would answer both, because when people come in the group, they are building a relationship with me and with the group. So there is this moment of the joy of coming together every week and kind of like finding your friends again, and oh my God, we're going to play together and we're going to have a moment. And I think the whole point is to build an activity, and it's to build emotional, relational muscles of how does that feel to ask for help, to build relationships, to present ourselves in a way, but then to be free creatively, to be independent. So in a way, it's like a practice for me of being human is both to be independent and willingly, consciously interconnected. So I don't want anyone to come to group and think that I am going to save their life, give advice, that if I'm not there, that's the opposite. I'm less and less interested by gurus, by the way. I'm interested by thoughts and provocations, but definitely I cannot stand when somebody tells you how to live your life. And I think that there is a big pull from everyone to go somewhere and ask for the magic recipe of how to live our lives. And that's the trap for me, is there is no magic recipe, and we are capable of creating magic. We all are. So let's tap into that.
Absolutely. We're both in alignment there. I've heard and read from so many gurus, and everybody has their strategies and techniques and frameworks. And I was part of that same ilk, prior to what I'm on right now. I'm on day 67 of a 180-day journey. I call it to become more fully human. And I'm learning on this journey that I want to live what I'm teaching first. Let me use my frameworks. Let me use my teaching. Let me get into myself. And let me spend 6 months just really exploring why I do that. The goal is to vibrate at 500 hertz love energy. So I'm going to focus on just being loving and giving. And on this journey, what I'm not doing is looking for transactions. Because again, I look at energy, again, going back to energy is everything is energy. So to me, selling, regardless of the intent, it's an extraction unless the other party feels that it was an increase. But if one person feels though they may have regret or they didn't get the value, that's an extraction from their energy, right? I don't want to do extractions. I don't want to convince people to do business with me using techniques and all these things I've learned. I believe that if there's true alignment and you create value in the universe, then people will say, I like what you're doing. I need your services. Your services can help me. And you engage into a partnership, a co-creation to make something better. That's what you want to build, right? And increase in both areas. So I'll close on that. And I want to give you an opportunity now to share with our listening audience what your group is about, what you're building, what you're working towards, and how they can get in contact with you, or anything else you want to say that might be important for them to understand what you're building.
All right. So what I'm really building is public spaces, again, for people to have the opportunity to come together, tap into a collective, build community with others, and learn how to develop their relational power. And and how to be in the world, both as who they are and who they want to become with others, and to be creative. I think it's something that I want to insist is to bring back creativity in our lives and to go away from this is the way things are and that's the only way. Well, what I'm saying is this is the way things are presented, and there are many ways to play with it. And the way we can not be stuck or feel stuck is by shaping and reshaping and using our imagination, critical thinking, and our relationship to others in order to practice our full humanity. The way to discover more about my practice, and I work, by the way, with other wonderful human beings, including Marian Rich, Jessica, Boydie, and C. Miranda, Rochelle, like so many people. And it's to go on my website, www.wemanitycoaching.com. And you can see and join a creative playground to play and be creative, or you can join a group to philosophize and grow your life with others. And here it is.
Well, thank you for being on the show. I'm grateful for you joining and investing your time and energy to be with me on the podcast today. I want to thank our listening audience, whether they're listening live or watching this on the replay. And we will have your website listed when we repost this. This is live now. We're going to repost it in a week once we edit. Mm-hmm. I just want to again thank you for the show. And I want to again apologize for just totally mispronouncing your business name. And that goes to my biases that I'm working on. See, I saw women something and I just ran with that. And instead of seeing Wemanity, that's a whole different intent, a whole different meaning. And I do again want to apologize for having that bias.
Very quickly, don't apologize, because first it was named at the very beginning Wemanity, because I was like thinking of another way of patriarchy, like, but then people were only seeing women and being like, oh, so that's only for women. And then it developed, and really what I want is Wemanity, we together, humanity. So don't apologize. And plus it gave me an opportunity to say that. So Wemanity is a result of becoming together.
It all works out. All right. Well, thank you again, Aurelie. And
thank you.
Look forward to coming into one of your groups. Thank you.
Oh, yes. See you in a couple of weeks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.